Have you ever felt a presence just beyond your door? The quiet creak of wood in the night, the hush of leaves against the window, the sense that something or someone is waiting outside. Yet, no matter how heavy the air feels, that shadow does not cross into your space. Not unless you open the door, not unless you invite it. This is the chilling law that echoes through centuries of folklore. A vampire cannot enter a home unless it is invited. It's one of the most hauntingly poetic rules in supernatural mythology. Unlike werewolves, demons, or restless spirits who may break through walls and force their way into our lives, vampires linger outside. They wait. They are patient predators, needing our own permission to cross the line. If you enjoy exploring the dark side of mythology, make sure to like this video, subscribe to Tales Mythology, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another legendary story. But why? Why would such a terrifying creature be bound by something as simple as manners? Why does a monster with the strength to tear a man apart with its claws politely hover at the doorstep, asking for hospitality? This rule, though strange on the surface, carries with it centuries of meaning. In folklore, in psychology, and even in our modern digital lives, the concept of an invitation is far more than a superstition. It is a metaphor for the choices we make, the doors we open, and the dangers we sometimes allow into our world without realizing it. The door as a symbol. A door is never just wood and hinges. In human history, the door has always been a boundary between the safe and the unsafe, between the known world and the chaos beyond. In ancient cultures, stepping into someone's home was not just physical, it was spiritual. To cross a threshold was to step into the heart of someone's private sanctuary. Folklorists point out that thresholds were often protected with rituals. In Rome, households placed protective deities at their doors. In Eastern Europe, villagers nailed iron, salt, or garlic near windows and doorways to ward off spirits. Even in modern homes, we hang wreaths, talismans, or family signs at the door, not just decoration, but a subconscious barrier of meaning. The vampire's need for invitation reflects this deep human instinct. The threshold is sacred, and only the will of the inhabitant can open it. Why invitation matters in myth. When we look at vampire lore from the Middle Ages, the invitation rule serves several symbolic purposes. Consent as power. The vampire may be stronger, older, and darker, but it cannot overcome the will of the human. The act of saying yes come in hands over power. In this sense, folklore teaches that evil often needs complicity to thrive. Blame and responsibility. Stories passed down through villages carried moral lessons. If someone let a vampire into their home, it was their mistake. They invited corruption inside. The tale warned listeners, guard your trust carefully, or you will be the architect of your own downfall. Metaphor for temptation. Vampires are not mindless beasts. They are seducers. They knock not with fists but with charm. To invite them is to yield to temptation, whether it be lust, greed, or loneliness. Modern parallels. Now pause and think about it. Doesn't this rule sound eerily familiar in our lives today? When we click accept friend request from a stranger, when we give our phone number to someone we barely know, when we open an email attachment without thinking, each act is an invitation. Each one is a threshold crossed, and much like the vampire outside your window, many dangers cannot touch you unless you first grant them entry. The invitation as a psychological trick. Part of what makes this so terrifying, that vampires rarely force the issue. Instead, they ask nicely. They may disguise themselves, smile sweetly, or speak in a voice that soothes your fears. This isn't just myth, it's human psychology. The most effective predators are not those who batter down walls, but those who wait until you invite them in. That way, when harm comes, you blame yourself. It's the same reason scams often begin with, "You've won a prize, just click here." It's the same reason abusers start with affection, flattery, and gifts before demanding more. The vampire rule dramatizes a truth we've known for centuries. Danger often begins with trust misplaced. The unspoken question. But here's the chilling question. Would you recognize the vampire at your door? What if the monster doesn't look like a monster, What if its fangs are hidden behind a smile, or its claws disguised by soft hands? Would you know the moment you opened your door, or clicked yes, that you had just invited your destruction? This is where myth blends into modern cautionary tale, and this is where our story begins. Transition into narrative. Imagine a young girl. Her room is quiet, lit only by the blue glow of a laptop screen. Outside, the night is silent. Inside, she feels utterly alone. She doesn't know it yet, but tonight she will open a door, not the wooden one with the lock, but a different kind of threshold, one that glows in her hands and connects her to strangers far beyond her walls. Her name is Lily, and the vampire at her door doesn't wear a cloak, or sprout wings, or hiss at garlic. He wears a smile. He speaks kindly. He listens, and he waits patiently for her to invite him in, because the greatest dangers are never those that barge into your life unannounced. They are the ones you welcome. And when you open the door, the darkness doesn't rush in. It seeps quietly across the threshold, one word, one gesture, one message at a time. Welcome, dear listener, to the tale of why vampires need an invitation, and why, even now, in the age of glowing screens, this rule is as relevant as ever. The vampire is one of the most universal monsters in human imagination, yet it wears 1,000 faces. Across Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Middle East, cultures told stories of creatures who drained life from the living, returning from death or darkness to prey on the innocent. But one thread appears again and again, in slightly different forms. The vampire cannot cross into your home unless invited. This law of invitation is not simply superstition. It reflects cultural fears, moral lessons, and spiritual traditions that span centuries. Let's wander through these tales, from misty Carpathian villages to ancient Chinese courts, and uncover the many ways humans have drawn lines between the safe hearth and the dangerous night. Eastern Europe, the heart of vampire lore. When most people think of vampires, they picture Eastern Europe, fog-drenched Transylvania, lonely castles, and the pale nobility of Bram Stoker's Dracula. But long before Stoker put pen to paper, Slavic villages told stories of the strigoi, the Nosferatu, and other undead who slipped from their graves to torment the living. In these communities, the home was sacred. Families protected thresholds with holy icons, garlic, or even wolf's blood. Why? Because the undead could not enter without being welcomed. To cross uninvited would violate the laws of both spirit and society. Folklorists suggest this rule reflected the sacredness of hospitality. In these regions, to invite someone in was a covenant of trust. A stranger given shelter was not to harm the household. The vampire twisted this sacred exchange. If you invited wrongly, you cursed yourself. Imagine a poor peasant family in 15th century Wallachia. Night falls, and the knock comes at the door. Outside, a pale figure begs for warmth. To refuse hospitality was shameful, even sinful, yet to welcome the wrong guest could doom the household. Thus the story of the vampire dramatized a real moral dilemma. When kindness can be exploited, where do you draw the line? Greece and the Balkans, the vrykolakas. In Greece, the vampire was called the vrykolakas, a bloated corpse like revenant who preyed upon relatives and neighbors. Villagers believed that these creatures, too, could not enter without being welcomed. This belief echoed Orthodox Christian traditions, where the home was consecrated space. Priests blessed thresholds, sprinkling holy water to keep unclean spirits at bay. To open the door to a vrykolakas was not just physical, it was spiritual defilement. Interestingly, some Greek stories added a cruel twist. The vrykolakas would mimic the voice of loved ones, calling from outside until someone, usually a child, responded. The moment a voice answered the call, the monster gained permission to enter. This eerie detail speaks to a deeper fear, the corruption of trust within families. It wasn't just strangers at the door. Sometimes, evil wore the mask of those closest to us. China, the jiangshi. Travel east, and we find the jiangshi, the Chinese hopping vampire. Unlike the suave, aristocratic vampires of Europe, the jiangshi was a stiff, reanimated corpse that leapt through the night, draining life force or chair. Did it need an invitation? Some sources suggest yes, not always to enter homes, but to cross certain thresholds. The doorway, with its raised wooden sill common in traditional Chinese architecture, was itself symbolic. To cross it uninvited was taboo for spirits. Taoist exorcism texts emphasized barriers, talismans, cinnabaring, and protective seals placed over doors. Just as in Europe, the vampire figure highlighted the sacredness of the home as a safe zone. But the jiangshi also reflected a uniquely Chinese anxiety, improper burial. If ancestors were not honored or interred correctly, they might return restless. The invitation rule here was less about hospitality and more about cosmic balance. One did not allow the restless dead to enter the space of the living unless harmony between the two realms had been acknowledged. The Middle East, ghouls and shadows. In Arabian folklore, the vampire-like figure was the ghoul, a shape-shifting creature that lured travelers into the desert to devour them. Ghouls did not always need invitations to strike, but in some variants, spirits could not enter homes without being called or acknowledged. Here again, the principle emerges. Danger gains power only when you respond. Think of the child who answers a whisper in the dark, or the weary traveler who stops when a stranger beckons. The invitation may not be verbal, it might be any acknowledgement, any moment of recognition that allows the predator to bridge the gap. India, the Vetala. In India, Hindu and Buddhist traditions tell of the Vetala, spirit-like entities that inhabited corpses and preyed upon the living. Temples and homes alike were guarded by mantras and protective symbols, for the Vetala respected sacred boundaries. In some tales, the Vetala could not approach unless the individual, through ritual error or carelessness, opened themselves spiritually. Again, the same theme arises. Evil requires a crack, a flaw, an open door to exploit. Universal patterns. Across these traditions, we see a striking pattern. The threshold is sacred. Whether in Romania, Greece, China, or India, the doorway marked a line between chaos and order, death and life. Hospitality is dangerous. Inviting the wrong guest is a universal fear. From peasants wary of strangers to children answering ghostly voices, humans knew that kindness could be weaponized. Consent is central. These myths gave humans agency. Evil was terrifying, but powerless unless you cooperated. That message empowered communities. Watch your doors, guard your words, be mindful of whom you welcome. A moral technology. Seen this way, the invitation rule was less about monsters and more about teaching boundaries. Stories are technologies of morality. They encode lessons in memorable form. When parents told children, "Don't answer voices outside the window at night," they weren't just warning of monsters. They were teaching caution with strangers, discernment in trust, and the importance of boundaries. And here lies the brilliance of folklore. By dramatizing danger as a vampire, a vrykolakas, or a jiangshi, the lesson became unforgettable. You could forget your mother's words, but who forgets the image of a pale, hungry creature waiting outside your door, powerless until you say, "Come in." Bridging myth to modernity. As we walk back from these global tales, we notice something sobering. The vampire's rule has not vanished. It has only evolved. In the digital age, the invitation is not spoken at the door. It is typed into a keyboard, clicked on a screen, whispered into a microphone. Our homes may have locks and alarms, but the true thresholds are our hearts and minds, and the choices we make when faced with a smiling stranger. This is the stage where Lily's story, which we touched on earlier, unfolds not in the forests of Transylvania or the deserts of Arabia, but in the glow of a teenage girl's bedroom. Her story echoes the same ancient lesson. Sometimes the monster cannot hurt you until you open the door yourself. And just like the villagers of old, she believed she was safe until she whispered her invitation. Why does the vampire wait at the door? Why not smash the window, claw through the roof, or force its way into the heart of the home for many other monsters of myth? The answer lies not only in tradition, but in the way humans understand choice. temptation, and blame. The vampire role is more than a quirk of folklore. It is a mirror of our own psychology. The monster who waits for permission. Think of it, a predator strong enough to break bones, fast enough to outrun wolves, and ancient enough to know every trick of survival, standing politely outside, waiting. That detail is what makes the vampire so terrifying. It is not mindless hunger, it is strategy. It does not take by force, it lures, seduces, persuades. It needs you to be an accomplice. This transforms the vampire from beast to manipulator, from animal to abuser. In stories, as in life, the monsters we fear most are not those who leap out from the bushes, but those who make us open the door ourselves. Consent as a weapon. On the surface, the rule grants humans power. The vampire cannot cross without your say-so. But beneath that surface lies a trap. If harm only comes after you say yes, then whose fault is it when disaster follows? Yours. This is the cruel twist embedded in vampire tales. The victim carries the burden of responsibility. The lesson becomes clear. Be careful whom you trust. Psychologists might call this victim-blaming folklore, but it also reflects a hard truth of survival in older societies. In small villages, where every stranger might bring disease or danger, being too trusting could kill you. The myth encoded this lesson in unforgettable, bone-deep imagery, the sweetness of temptation. But vampires don't only ask permission, they make you want to give it. Folklore paints them as pale, beautiful, magnetic. They are not merely introductory or temptation incarnate. Their charm makes you forget the danger, until the invitation slips from your lips like a sigh. Isn't this exactly how temptation works in our own lives? A toxic relationship begins not with violence, but with kindness. Addiction doesn't start with pain, but with relief. Manipulation begins not with threats, but with flattery. Evil does not storm in wearing horns. It whispers, "Trust me, let me in." Psychology of manipulation. Modern psychology identifies several techniques abusers and manipulators use eerily close to the vampire's methods. Love bombing. Overwhelming someone with affection, attention, or flattery. It makes the victim feel special, unique. The vampire doesn't just wait, it woos. Mirroring. Predators mimic their target's likes, dislikes, fears, and hopes, creating the illusion of soul-level connection. Folklore often shows vampires studying their prey before striking, just like a manipulator learns what makes you open the door. Foot in the door. Getting someone to agree to a small request, then escalating to larger ones. The first invitation might be as simple as opening the window to talk. Later, it becomes opening the door at midnight. These techniques demonstrate the psychological truth of the vampire myth. Danger often slips past our defenses, because it feels like our idea. We believe we are in control until it's too late. The door as the self. Psychologists also interpret the threshold as a symbol of the self. The walls of our home are the walls of our mind and heart. What we let in through trust, words, and relationship shapes us. Invite love, and your inner home is warm. Invite corruption, and the rot begins within. This is why the vampire must wait for invitation. It embodies the fear that our worst undoing often begins with our own choice. Real-life parallels. This myth is not just ancient superstition, it plays out in daily life. Scams. A phone call claiming to be your bank. They don't steal from you by force. They convince you to hand over information. You invite them in. Toxic friendships. They start with laughter and shared secrets. By the time the betrayal comes, you've already opened your door 100 times. Digital dangers. A stranger online compliments your art, your photos, your words. Slowly, you let them deeper into your private world. By the time you realize they are not who they claim, they are already inside. The vampire at the door is a metaphor for every moment when trust becomes a weapon against us. The burden of blame. One reason vampire stories grip us so tightly is the awful, lingering thought, "I'll let it happen." This is what makes Lily's story, which we are moving toward, so heartbreaking. Her danger did not break down the door, it waited, gently, until she invited it. And when harm came, she carried not only trauma, but the crushing weight of guilt. This is also why so many victims of manipulation, abuse, or fraud hesitate to speak out. They think it was my fault. I opened the door. Folklore predicted this burden centuries ago, and in a dark way. It teaches a truth. Evil rarely conquers by sheer force. It thrives when it convinces us to lower the drawbridge ourselves. The dual nature of the rule. The invitation rule is paradoxical. On one hand, it empowers us. No one can enter without our permission. On the other hand, it terrifies us, because when we fall, it is we who whispered the words that let the danger in. This duality makes the vampire enduring. It embodies the delicate balance between autonomy and vulnerability, between the safety of refusal and the danger of desire. Boundaries as survival. So what lesson can we take from this? That boundaries are not Kagisteya shields. In the modern world, we are bombarded with requests for entry. Click here. Follow me. Trust me. The vampire at the door has never disappeared. It has simply changed its clothes. The myth reminds us that we are not powerless. We can say no. We can guard our thresholds. And most importantly, we must learn to recognize the smile that hides the fangs. Because once the invitation is given, taking it back is far harder. Transition to Lily's tale. And this is where myth becomes reality. When we speak of vampires today, we don't just mean cloaked figures in castles. We mean predators who disguise themselves as friends, lovers, mentors. For Lily, the vampire didn't knock on her wooden door at midnight. It appeared on a glowing screen, with kind words and gentle laughter. She didn't realize that each message, each secret, each late-night whisper was an invitation. By the time she noticed the shadow crossing her threshold, it was far too late. And so, our story deepens not just in ancient folklore, but in the life of one girl whose loneliness became the open door. Her room was dim, painted in the glow of a laptop screen. Outside the window, the night pressed close like a heavy curtain, muffling the world. At 15, Lily's universe had shrunk to this small space, 4 walls lined with posters, stacks of forgotten homework on the desk, and the endless, hypnotic scroll of digital life. In school, she felt invisible. She walked through hallways like a ghost, unseen by the laughter of classmates clustered in their groups. Teachers marked her papers with half-hearted comments. Her parents were often away, and even when they were home, their voices seemed occupied with other concerns. But online she existed. There, someone might notice her words. There, she might feel real. The cry into the void. That night, as the clock crawled past midnight, Lily typed a short post into an online forum. Sometimes it feels like I don't exist. Does anyone else feel that way? It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't meant to be. Just a sigh into the abyss, like tossing a message in a bottle into the dark sea. She half expected no one to answer, but the reply came quickly. A small notification blinked at the corner of her screen. New message. Her heart skipped. She clicked. The profile was unfamiliar. Nitsky 17. The photo showed a boy about her age, messy dark hair, soft smile, warm eyes that seemed to look right at her. His message was simple. I saw your post. I get it. You're not alone. Just one line. But to Lily, it felt like someone had reached through the screen and touched her hand. The power of attention. Lily hesitated. She had heard the warnings, don't trust strangers online. But his words weren't like the mockery she endured at school, or the silence she felt at home. His words carried empathy, a reflection of her own loneliness. Her fingers hovered, trembling slightly, then typed back, "Hi." That was the beginning. What started with a single cautious greeting soon unfurled into a stream of words. She told him she was just feeling low. He responded with patience, asking questions that showed he cared. What's school like? What do you like to do when you're sad? No one had asked her those things before, not in a way that sounded like they wanted to hear the answer. And so, she answered. She talked about sketching in the margins of her notebooks, about watching horror movies late at night, about feeling like an outsider in every room. He listened. At least, it felt like he did. The comfort of being seen. Hours passed. By the time she closed her laptop, her chest felt lighter. She fell asleep with the faintest smile, clutching her phone as though it were a lifeline. In the morning, She woke to another message. He had written, "Hope you slept okay. Talk soon." Her pulse quickened. The message was waiting for her like a gift, wrapped in pixels. And just like that, a routine began. Every day after school, she hurried home, closed her door, and logged in. She skipped meals, skipped assignments, even skipped her art club, one place she'd once found a little belonging. But Mark, as he introduced himself, filled that gap completely. When she laughed at his jokes, it felt like sunlight in her chest. When he said her art was good, she flushed with pride. When he told her she mattered, she wanted to believe it with every fiber of her being. The invitation begins. Here is where the myth comes alive. Lily did not know it, but every message was a step closer to the threshold. He did not storm into her life demanding attention. He waited outside, smiling, kind, patient, and she opened the door herself and secret, one confession, one late night laugh at a time. This is the essence of the vampire's rule. The predator does not force entry. It makes the victim long to open the door. The isolation grows. Her mother knocked on the door one evening, frustrated. "Dinner's cold, Lily. Who are you talking to all the time?" "Just a friend," she muttered, too quietly for her mom to catch. The irritation in her mother's voice made Lily feel even more misunderstood. She didn't want to explain. Mark understood. Mark always understood. So she poured her frustrations into the chat box that night. "My mom doesn't get it. Parents never do," he replied. "At least you have me." That line wrapped around her heart like a blanket. She whispered into her phone, "Yeah, at least I have you." The bubble of trust. Within weeks, Mark had become her secret world. She sent him little sketches from her notebooks. He praised them like they were masterpieces. She sent selfish as it at first, then smiling when his compliments rolled in. He sent photos too. Silly grins from his desk, peace signs at a skate park, fragments of a boy's life that made her feel like she was part of it. Together, they created what he called our little club, a private sanctuary just for them. And Lily, lonely, unseen Lily, finally felt like she belonged somewhere. The trap woven in kindness. Here is the genius of the vampire's invitation. It does not begin with fangs. It begins with warmth. Manipulators know this. Attention is addictive. Kindness is a leash when used with precision. By making Lily feel special, Mark was weaving threads around her life, so that when he pulled, she would not even notice the tightening noose. This is how predators exploit loneliness, not by crashing through the window, but by convincing you that the open door is your salvation. The first red flags. There were moments, small and fleeting, when Lily wondered. He never turned on his camera. His excuse: broken webcam, bad connection, were always just convincing enough. But when doubt stirred, he soothed it with gentle reassurances. "I'm just shy. But trust me, I'm here." She wanted to believe. So she did. And every time she swallowed that doubt, she placed another key into his hand. Modern vampires. This is where folklore and modern life collide. In the old tales, the vampire waited at the doorstep, disguised as a weary traveler. In today's world, the disguise is a profile picture. The doorstep is a chat box, and the invitation is a single click reply. Lily did not know it, but she had already whispered the ancient word, "Come in," foreshadowing darkness. By the end of the week, Lily could not imagine a day without Mark. He was the first voice she looked for in the morning and the last she heard at night. Her grades slipped, her meals went untouched, her mother's concern turned into anger. But none of that mattered, because she had found someone who noticed her, who cared, who made her feel alive. And as she curled under her blankets, foam glowing against her cheek, she whispered goodnight to the boy she thought was her savior, not realizing that in truth, she had invited in her destroyer. The vampire at the door is no longer wrapped in cloaks or lurking in graveyards. In our age, it sits behind screens, hidden in usernames, polished photos, and messages crafted to sound warm and safe. If ancient myths warned villagers about strangers at the threshold, today those same lessons warn us about digital thresholds or inboxes, our social media feeds, our private chats. Because even now, Evil cannot always reach us unless we first whisper, "Come in." Predators in disguise. Lily's story is not unique. Across the world, thousands of people, especially teenagers, encounter predators who hide behind friendly profiles. They do not appear with claws and fangs. They appear with compliments, jokes, and understanding words. It starts small. A like on a post. A comment saying, "I feel the same way." A private message, soft and casual. "Hey, just wanted to say you're cool." And just like the vampire at the threshold, these predators know that once they are insidious, the trust is open-ended. They can take whatever they want. The digital invitation. Think about the modern equivalents of saying, "Come in." Accepting a friend request from someone you don't know. Clicking a link that promises a prize. Sharing private feelings with a stranger online. Sending a picture just for them. Each of these moments is a door creaking open, and once opened, the barrier between safety and danger collapses. Case Study 1. The Friendly Stranger. In one widely reported case, a teenage boy in the United States joined a gaming forum where he bonded with another player who seemed supportive and funny. The player listened when he vented about fights with his parents. He sent memes to make him laugh. Weeks later, the boy was convinced they were best friends. Only then did the requests come, first to chat privately, then to exchange photos, then to prove trust through more intimate images. By the time the boy realized he had been manipulated, the predator had dozens of files to hold against him. The predator had never once forced entry. The boy had invited him in. Case Study 2. The Glamour of Love. Another story, this time in Europe. A young woman received a message from a man who claimed to be a musician. His profile was filled with charming pictures, and his words were poetic. He complimented her artwork, told her she was beautiful, promised he wanted nothing but friendship. Within months, she was sending him money to help with travel. Later, she shared private photos he requested. When he revealed himself as a scammer, she not only lost money, she carried crushing shame. Here again, the vampire never broke down the door. She invited him in, believing the romance was real. The psychology of consent. What makes these digital vampires so dangerous is not brute force, but persuasion. In psychology, researchers call this social engineering, manipulating people into giving up information, access, or even their safety. The trick isn't power, it's consent. People feel they are making their own choice, when in truth the choice has been carefully guided. This mirrors the ancient vampire myth perfectly. The predator cannot act until the victim opens the door, and once the invitation is spoken, a clicked victim feels complicit in their own downfall. Scams as vampires. It isn't only vulnerable teenagers. Adults, too, fall victim to modern vampires. Phishing emails disguised as banks ask you to verify your account. You click, you type, and suddenly the door to your finances swings wide open. Romance scams lure lonely hearts into long-distance relationships, draining them emotionally and financially. Ponzi schemes offer glittering returns if you just trust them with your money. Every scam thrives not on breaking in, but on being let in. Real-life vampire traits. If we strip away the supernatural skin, modern predators and scams share the same traits as folklore vampires. Charm and seduction. They rarely appear frightening at first. Instead, they dazzle with smiles, promises, or flattery. Patience. Vampires in stories wait for days, even years, to strike. Predators, too, may spend months building trust before revealing their hunger. Dependency. Once inside, they drain slowly. Just as the vampire sips blood night after night, the manipulator extracts money, attention, photos, or trust little by little until the victim is hollow. The digital thresholds we ignore. In ancient times, villagers hung garlic at their doors. Today, we lock our houses but leave our phones wide open. A stranger thousands of miles away can appear in your bedroom simply by lighting up your screen. The danger is not that the monster can cross barriers on its own. The danger is that the barrier is meaningless if you open it yourself. The vampire within. There is also a subtler, darker layer. Sometimes, the vampire is not another person, it is temptation within ourselves. the invitation to scroll endlessly instead of rest, the lure of destructive habits dressed as comfort, the whisper that says, just one more drink, one more bet, one more hour. In these cases, the monster waits not at your door, but in your mind, and once you whisper yes, it comes rushing in, bringing it back to Lily. This is the world Lily lived in. She did not leave her house. She did not walk alone at night. She was careful with the physical doors around her, but she did not realize that the true threshold was glowing in her hands, and that with every message, every shared thought, every trusting smile typed into a chat box, she was inviting the vampire deeper into her life. By the time she recognized the danger, it was already inside. Lily's world had narrowed to the glow of her phone. Morning, noon, and midnight, her thoughts revolved around the same figure, Mark. At school, she doodled his name in the margins of her notebooks. In class, her mind wandered to what he might text her next. The real world blurred into grey, while the small glowing rectangle in her hand pulsed with colour and warmth. She did not see the bars of the cage forming around her. All she saw was the sweetness of the voice inside it, threads of control. At first, it had felt innocent, jokes, confessions, long chats about nothing. But gradually, Mark's messages became the architecture of her day. Good morning. Did you sleep okay? He was the first voice she heard each day. How did class go? Did anyone bother you? He inserted himself into her school life, though unseen. You're special, you know, not like other people. He planted himself in her self-image, making her believe her worth was reflected through him. When she smiled at his compliments, she didn't realize they were chains disguised as gifts. The psychology of entrapment. Psychologists describe this as grooming, a slow, deliberate process of earning trust, then exploiting it, step by step. The manipulator shapes the victim's world until they depend on the predator for validation. In folklore, the vampire hypnotizes its victim. In reality, the hypnosis comes from constant attention, gentle flattery, and the comfort of routine. Every good morning from Mark was another whisper at the window. Every compliment was another nudge toward opening the door wider. The erosion of doubt. Sometimes, Lily hesitated. Weeks had passed, yet she had never seen his face on camera. His excuses came easily. His webcam was broken, his connection to poor, his parents too strict. But whenever a seed of doubt sprouted, he smothered it with tenderness. I know it's weird, but I promise I'm real. I wish I could prove it to you. Just trust me. And because she wanted to trust, because she needed someone to believe in, she nodded silently at her screen and let the doubt slip away. This is how vampires work. They do not barge in with fangs bared. They lull, they charm. They coax you into believing the door is not a danger at all. The first secret. One night, Mark typed, "Let's keep this just between us. Our special club. Nobody else would understand." Lily's chest tightened with excitement. She belonged to something secret, something sacred. She agreed. But in that moment, a subtle shift occurred. By making their bond secret, he placed himself above everyone else in her life, her parents, her friends, her teachers. If anyone tried to question him, she would see them as outsiders. Predators know this trick well. Isolation is not forced, it is offered as intimacy. And Lily accepted the offer with a shy smile. Life slipping away. Her grades slipped. Homework lay forgotten in her backpack. Meals grew cold on the table. Her mother's worrying turned to anger. Why are you always on that phone? You're not sleeping. You look pale. You've changed, Lily. And not in a good way. But instead of hearing concern, Lily heard intrusion. She ran back to Mark's messages, where sympathy waited. Parents don't understand. I do. Don't worry, you are safe with me. The words calmed her. Yet in truth, each one was a thread tightening around her. The vampire's patience. In folklore, vampires are immortal hunters. They do not rush. They linger outside, night after night, until the victim's resolve weakens. Mark mirrored this patience. He never pushed too hard, too fast. He gave Lily just enough kindness to keep her hooked, then waited for her to come closer on her own. This is what makes predators so dangerous. They make you believe the trap was your choice all along. jealousy and dependency. Soon, Mark's words shifted tone. If Lily didn't reply quickly, he grew quiet. If she mentioned talking to someone else at school, he teased her. "Oh, so I'm not your favorite anymore." At first, it felt playful, but gradually, she found herself anxious to keep him happy, worried that if she didn't answer right away, she might lose him. And so she checked her phone constantly, even in class, even in the middle of family dinners. Her heart raced at every vibration. Her identity became tethered to his approval. The first boundary crossed. Then came the night he sent a photo shirtless, artfully lit, a teenage boy's face smiling shyly at the camera. "This is me right now, thinking of you." Her cheeks flushed as she typed back, emojis tumbling across the screen. She felt special, chosen. Then came the gentle nudge, "Your turn. Only if you want to. I'd just love to feel close to you." Her breath caught. She hesitated, but his reassurances flowed in, no pressure. "I love you. You're safe with me." And slowly, with trembling fingers, she sent something back. Not much, just enough. But enough was all he needed. The invitation fulfilled. Here. At last, the door creaked open fully. He had not forced her. He had not demanded. He had waited. He had charmed. He had made her believe she wanted to offer the key herself. This is the cruelest truth of the vampire rule. The danger is not only that harm comes after the invitation. The greater horror is that the victim often feels responsible for speaking the words. The tightening grip. From then on, Mark's messages carried more weight. Subtle threats appeared between the sweet words. "I'd never show anyone what you sent me unless you hurt me." Lily's stomach knotted when she read them, but when she tried to push the thought away, his kindness returned, washing over her fear like a tide. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. I just care about you so much." Back and forth he pulled her fear and comfort, shame and relief until her emotions bent entirely around him. This is called trauma bonding, when affection and cruelty intertwine so tightly that the victim cannot separate them. It is one of the most powerful tools predators wield, and just like the vampire at the door, he had crossed her threshold not with violence, but with whispers. Foreshadow of the meeting. By now, Lily's sense of reality was warped. Her mother's concern felt like betrayal. School was meaningless noise. The only thing that felt real was Mark. So when he finally wrote, "I wish we could meet. Just us. No one else has to know," her heart raced not with fear, but with anticipation. The predator had been invited not just into her room, but into her life. And soon, she would step willingly into his world, unaware of the darkness that waited. The night was colder than Lily expected. She pulled her jacket tighter, breath puffing in pale clouds as she walked down the empty street. Every step felt like a drumbeat of nerves and excitement. She replayed his words in her head. "I can't wait to finally see you. Just us. Away from everyone else." Her heart fluttered. This was it. The moment her secret friendship became real. The moment she would prove to herself and to the world that Mark was more than just pixels on a screen. The park was quiet, swallowed in shadow. The gazebo loomed at its center, half lit by the cold wash of moonlight. Lily hesitated, hugging herself against the chill, then whispered, "Mark." The name trembled from her lips. The man in the shadows. A figure stepped out from behind a pillar, tall, broad-shouldered, older, much older than the face she'd imagined 4 months. For a heartbeat, her mind refused to accept it. Maybe she had gone to the wrong place. Maybe this was someone else. Then he spoke. Her name, in the same voice she had heard whispered through countless messages, typed into countless chats. Her stomach dropped like a stone into a black lake. The mask falls. The man stepped into the moonlight, and the illusion crumbled. The soft smile from his photos was gone. His hair was cropped and streaked with grey. Stubble shadowed his jaw. His eyes, once warm in the images she cherished, gleamed cold and sharp. This was Mark, and yet not Mark at all. Every compliment, every joke, every reassurance had been words typed by this stranger. Every late-night laugh she'd shared had been mirrored in his calculating smirk. Her legs trembled. Where is Mark? she stammered, clinging to denial even as the truth blazed before her. "I'm right here," he said. His smile widened, and in it she finally saw the fangs not literal, but sharper than any monster's. The moment of realization. This is the heart of the vampire myth. The prey realizes, too late, that the guest at the door is not a friend, but a predator. The invitation has been spoken, and now the true face emerges. The horror is not just the danger. It is the betrayal of trust, the shattering of everything believed to be safe and kind. Flight and snare. Lily stumbled back, her breath ragged. No, this isn't right. She turned to run, but his hand shot out, fingers clamping around her wrist like iron. She gasped at the pain, pulling, thrashing, but his grip tightened. "Shh," he hissed, his voice coiled with menace now. "Don't make a scene." Her pulse hammered in her ears. "Let go. You don't want me to show people those pretty pictures, do you?" His words dripped into her ear like venom. Her body froze. Terror surged through her chest. Those photos, how could she have forgotten? He had them. The proof. Her secret. Her shame. One whisper of those files being shared would unravel her world. She went still. Her struggles died on her lips. "Good girl," he muttered, tugging her toward the parking lot where a dark car waited beneath the trees. The drive into darkness. The passenger door yawned open like the mouth of a coffin. Lily hesitated, but his calm voice cut through her resistance. "Get in." She obeyed, trembling. The seatbelt snapped shut across her chest, binding her in place. The car rumbled to life. Streetlights flickered by in blurred streaks. She pressed herself against the door, silent tears rolling down her cheeks. Every detail burned itself into her mind. The sour stench of cigarettes, the faint crack across the windshield, the rhythmic tap of his fingers on the steering wheel. She tried to imagine screaming, throwing herself out, running barefoot into the dark, but her phone lay on the console, his hand brushing it occasionally like a warning. The photos were her prison. The vampire revealed. At last, the car pulled into a dirt path, trees skeletal against the night sky. The engine cut off. The silence roared in her ears. He turned to her, eyes glinting. "You know, you're even prettier in person." Lily's body shook. Please don't." But he leaned closer, his breath hot and sour, his voice low and chilling. "You let me in, remember?" Those words, so casual, struck her like lightning. She had invited him. Every late-night chat, every secret shared, every photo sent. She had whispered the vampire's permission without realizing it. Now, he had crossed the threshold. The final bite. In folklore, this is the moment the vampire sinks its teeth into the victim's neck. The moment desire curdles into horror, trust curdles into betrayal. For Lily, the bite was not literal fangs. It was the theft of safety, the violation of innocence, the invasion of her most sacred boundaries, the shattering of a world. She drifted in and out of herself as the night unraveled. At one moment, she was thrashing, sobbing, begging. At another, she went still, staring at the morph trapped in the car's dome light, focusing on anything but the weight crushing her chest. It felt like her soul was being siphoned away, drop by drop, until she was hollow. By the time the ordeal ended, she was no longer the girl who had typed hi into a chat box weeks ago. That girl was gone. The walk back, hours later, he dropped her near her home. Her legs were weak, her clothes disheveled, her mind fractured. She stumbled through the silent streets, the familiar houses now looming like strangers. Every light in every window felt like an accusation. When she finally shut her own door behind her, the lock clicked into place with a sound that mocked her. This door had never mattered. She had let him in long before he stood before her. The vampire's feast, and somewhere, in a dim room littered with soda cans and notebooks, the predator leaned back in his chair, scrolling through her messages with a smile. Her photos were saved in a folder. Her secrets were pinned on a board. She was one of many, and he was already hunting for the next invitation. Morning light seeped through Lily's curtains, pale and indifferent. She sat curled on the edge of her bed, her body wrapped in a long-sleeve shirt, though the room was warm. The world looked the same as it had the day before, the same walls, the same posters, the same window framing the same sky, and yet everything had changed. She could still hear his words echoing in her head. She could still feel the cold grip on her wrist. She could still taste the shame in her throat. And worst of all, the thought returned again and again. I let him in. The weight of guilt. 4 days. Lily moved through her house like a ghost. Her mother's voice drifted from the kitchen. Her classmates' laughter rang in the hallways. But none of it reached her. Every time her phone buzzed, dread knotted in her chest. She deleted his messages without reading them. But still the fear gnawed. What if he shows them? What if he tells everyone? This is the cruelest wound predators inflict, not only the trauma of what they take, but the burden of blame they leave behind. Survivors often whisper the same refrain. It was my fault. I invited him in. But here is where folklore, dark as it is, also carries a hidden light. The lesson beneath the horror. The vampire myth may seem to punish the victim, but it also reminds us the power of the threshold still belongs to us. If an invitation can let harm in, then a refusal can keep it out. And if a door can be opened, it can also be closed again. Healing begins when survivors reclaim the truth. The fault was never in the invitation, but in the monster who exploited it. The road to healing. For Lily, healing did not come all at once. It came in fragments. The first confession. One night, she whispered to a friend online, a girl she trusted from art club, a hint of what had happened. Not everything, just enough to break the silence. The friend didn't blame her. She listened. That was the first crack of light through the dark. The journal. Weeks later, Lily began writing in a notebook. At first, just scribbles of rage and despair. Later, sketches of doors, of keys, of shadows kept outside. Without realizing, she was drawing her own myth, rewriting her story one page at a time. The small victories. Finishing a sketch, eating a full meal, laughing, truly laughing at a silly meme. Each one was a brick in the wall she was rebuilding around herself. Not a prison, but a fortress. Real-life stories of resilience. Lily's story echoes countless real lives. Survivors of grooming, scams, or manipulation often describe the same arc. Devastation followed by the slow, painful process of rebuilding. A woman in Canada, tricked by a romance scam, later turned her experience into a non-profit that educates others about online predators. A teenager in the UK, once blackmailed with intimate photos, now speaks publicly in schools to warn others about digital safety. A man in the US, after losing everything in a financial scheme, found new purpose as a counselor for others navigating fraud recovery. Each of them once whispered, "Come in," to a vampire. But each of them also found the strength to rebuild their threshold stronger than before. Boundaries as healing. Boundaries are not just lines to keep monsters out. They are affirmations of self-worth. To say no is to say, I matter. My safety matters. My space matters. For survivors, setting boundaries anew can be terrifying. Every knock at the door sounds suspicious. But slowly, with care, those boundaries transform from walls of fear into walls of strength. The myth of the invitation, seen through this lens, becomes empowering. It teaches that even when harm has entered, even when the vampire has crossed the threshold, the door can still be reclaimed. The role of community. In every culture, vampire myths were not faced alone. Villages hung garlic together. Families prayed at their thresholds together. Communities warned one another of suspicious travelers. Healing, too, is not meant to be solitary. Survivors heal faster when surrounded by voices that remind them, it was not your fault. You are not alone. You can rebuild. When Lily's friend checked in daily, when her mother eventually noticed the silent storm and simply sat beside her without asking questions, these moments became the new invitations, not to danger, but to safety, love, and care. The phoenix from ashes. Over time, the nightmares softened. The phone that once burned in her hand became, little by little, just a phone again. She still carried scars, but scars are not just reminders of pain, they are proof of survival. She began to draw again. This time pictures of doors glowing with light, of figures standing tall behind thresholds they chose to guard. For the first time, Lily understood the myth not just as a curse, but as a metaphor for her power. She had once opened the door. She could learn never to open it so carelessly again. And more than that, she could teach others to guard their thresholds too. Hope beyond horror. The story of the vampire invitation does not have to end in despair. It can also end in wisdom. Every mistake, every wound, every betrayal can become a lesson that strengthens the boundaries of those who survive. Just as villages developed rituals to protect their homes, survivors today develop rituals to protect their hearts, blocking unsafe profiles, pausing before sharing secrets, reaching out for help when doubt gnaws. The vampire at the door will always exist, but so too will the strength of those who choose not to answer. Why do vampires need an invitation? It seems like such a strange rule. Why would a predator bound by hunger hesitate at a simple door frame? Why should a whispered come in matter more than claws or fangs? The answer, hidden in folklore and echoed in Lily's story, is that the invitation is never about the vampire. It is about us. The power of thresholds. The threshold is more than wood and stone. It is a symbol of choice. To let someone cross into your home or into your heart or into your mind is to grant them power. Ancient villagers understood this. That is why they hung garlic, painted talismans, or blessed their doors with prayer. They knew that once the boundary was crossed, safety could no longer be guaranteed. Today, our thresholds are not guarded with garlic or crucifixes. They are guarded with passwords, with intuition, with the simple but difficult word no. The invitation as consent. The vampire myth reminds us that consent is sacred. No one, not even a monster, can cross without it. But it also warns us that consent can be twisted, manipulated, or stolen through deception. The predator waits patiently, not to break down the door, but to make you open it yourself. This is why Lily's story feels so chilling. She did not break any locks. She did not walk into the woods alone. She only whispered yes to someone who pretended to care. And that whisper became her undoing. The shared burden of blame. For too long, survivors of betrayal have carried the guilt of their own invitations. They say, I shouldn't have trusted him. I shouldn't have clicked that link. I shouldn't have answered. But folklore teaches us that the vampire has always needed this trick. It has always survived by disguising danger as desire, harm as help. Blame does not belong to the one who opened the door, but to the creature who waited in disguise to exploit the act. The myth is not meant to shame us. It is meant to sharpen us, to make us cautious, to remind us that not every smile is safe, not every knock deserves an answer. Modern vampires. Think about the thresholds you guard today. A friend request on social media, a stranger's DM that begins with flattery, a scam email disguised as an urgent notice, a toxic voice promising comfort, if only you'll trust them. These are not cloaked figures at our windows. These are digital vampires, psychological predators, and internal temptations. And all of them wait for the same thing, an invitation. Reclaiming the threshold. So what is the lesson? It is not to lock ourselves away in fear. It is to recognize the power of our choice. The invitation is ours to give, and ours to withhold. We cannot stop the world from knocking. We cannot stop loneliness, temptation, or manipulation from calling our names. But we can decide who steps across our threshold. We can pause before clicking. We can question before trusting. We can listen to the unease in our gut when a smile feels too sharp. These are our garlic, our holy water, our talismans, small rituals that protect our homes and hearts. Hope for survivors, and for those who have already whispered the invitation. For those like Lily, the myth carries another truth. Thresholds can be rebuilt. Doors can be closed again. Yes, the vampire crossed. Yes, harm was done. But that does not mean the home is forever ruined. Survivors can reclaim their doorways, reforging them stronger with wisdom, resilience, and new boundaries. Every scar becomes a warning sign carved into the wood. Never again. A universal lesson. From the forests of Transylvania to the alleys of Athens, from the temples of India to the villages of China, the same story has been told for centuries. Beware what you invite into your home. Beware what you invite into your heart. Because monsters rarely force their way inside. They wait for you to open the door. Closing words. So when you next hear a knock at midnight, whether from a stranger, a scammer, or even the whisper of your own temptations, pause. Look through the peephole. Listen to your instincts. Remember that your invitation is your power. Once given, it cannot easily be undone, but withheld, it keeps you safe. Guard your threshold. Protect your door. And never forget the oldest lesson of vampire lore. The greatest danger cannot hurt you unless you invite it inside.